Double crochet is a much taller and looser stitch than single crochet or half double crochet, which makes it really good for projects that you want to move fast, but that don't need a lot of structure, like a blanket. Double crochet is one of those strange stitches where the turning chain actually counts as a stitch. It creates sort of some holes in the sides of your crochet piece, but that's perfectly normal. Now you can go without doing the turning chain counting as a stitch, but you get sort of a wavy pattern here. So you can kind of decide what you like and what you prefer. To begin, make a slip knot and then chain 12 stitches. For double crochet, we need 2 more chains than the number of stitches that we're going to work. So in this case, we have 2 extra chains so that we can make 10 double crochets. Now that I have my 12 chains, I am ready to start with a double crochet. Double crochet begins like a half double crochet with a yarn over. But we don't go into the 3rd stitch. We're actually going to go into the 4th chain. So we're going to skip 1, 2, 3 chains and then go into the 4th chain here. So go ahead and dive into that 4th chain, yarn over and bring up a loop, and you should have 3 loops on your hook. This is also different than half double crochet. Instead of pulling through all 3 loops, we're going to pull through 2 and then 2. So yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops again, and we're back to 1 loop. Now let's look at what we just made here. We have a lot of chain right here. That's because these 3 chains that we skipped actually count as our first double crochet. Then we created a double crochet. So what we actually have here is 2 stitches, the turning chain that counts as 1 stitch, and our first double crochet. We only have 8 chains left, and that's on purpose because we already have our first 2 stitches. All right, let's make another double crochet in the next chain. Yarn over, dive into that next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, and you should have 3 loops on your hook. Now we yarn over and pull through just the first 2, yarn over and pull through 2 again, and we've made our second double crochet. Yarn over, dive into the chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Keep making your double crochets all the way across. It looks like I just have 1 chain remaining. This should be my 10th stitch. But of course, since it's my first time doing double crochet, I'm going to stop and count. So let's look at our little piece so far. We've got this bit on the end, these 3 turning chains. That's actually stitch number 1. And then we've got this first double crochet post, and here's the stitch that belongs to it. So our turning chain counts as 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this will be our last stitch here in the last chain. Yarn over, dive in, yarn over, pull up a loop, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and your first row of double crochet is complete. Now the second row and all the other rows are exactly the same. So our turning chain again is going to be 3 chains. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to turn clockwise so that we're ready to go from right to left again. Here's where things are a little bit weird. On our first row, when we went into the chain, we went into the 4th chain from the hook. So you would think that we would want to skip these 3 chains and go into the first stitch. But actually we're not going to do that. Since these 3 chains count as our first stitch, we are also going to skip this first stitch here. So really we're going into the 2nd stitch. So we're kind of skipping 3 chains and a stitch and going into the 2nd stitch here. So go ahead and yarn over, skip your 3 chains, and skip your first stitch since these 3 chains are going to count as a stitch, and go into the 2nd stitch here. You're going to go underneath both of those loops since it's 1 stitch. yarn over and pull through the whole stitch, both of those loops, and you should have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So if we look at our swatch here, I can see a skipped space there. That's because these 3 chains are that stitch. And then I see my first double crochet post. So we actually have 2 stitches here and 8 to go. Keep making your double crochets across until you get to the end, and I'll show you what that looks like down there. So I am now very near to the end of my row. I've got 1 space left that looks like a stitch, but I'm also remembering that this turning chain down here counts as a stitch too. So if that's the case, this should be my 9th and this should be my 10th stitch, but I'm going to check. So if I pull out this swatch, I've got my turning chain, that's stitch number 1, and then I've got number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, so I am on track. So let's look at these last 2 stitches. The 9th one is just going to look like before. Yarn over, go into that whole stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. This last stitch is where things are a little bit different. So I'm looking at this turning chain, but I'm looking at it from the back. So I can see what we sometimes call the butts of the stitches here. Some people like to just dive into that space for their last stitch, but I don't like to go into that space. What I like to do is go into this top turning chain here. So if you can see, I've got the butt and I've got the front part of that stitch that looks like a chain if I turn it over. So where I actually want to go in is underneath so that I get both of those strands. I'm going to show you without the yarn over first. So I like to go underneath that little butt and I get 2 strands here. I know that can be a little bit hard to see, so let me show you that again. So this time I'm going to do my yarn over to make my double crochet, and I'm going right there so that I'm underneath this strand and this strand. So right underneath, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So as you can see now, we have a nice straight edge here, nothing like the waves we get if we don't use the turning chain as a stitch. All right, let's begin our 3rd row. It's just like the 2nd row. Chain 3 for your turning chain, and remember, this is going to count as our first stitch too, so keep it nice and loose. Turn clockwise so we're ready to go around the other way. Now we're going to skip the 3 turning chains, of course, but we're also skipping the first stitch here because our 3 turning chains count as a stitch. So we're really going into the 2nd stitch. Yarn over, skip those 3 turning chains and the first stitch and go right into that 2nd stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And I'm just going to make my way to the end of this row again so we can see what that looks like one more time. I've made it again to my last 2 stitches, so I've got a double crochet here to go into and then my turning chain. It's pretty obvious that we're nowhere close to being done because I don't have this edge straight yet. So let's do that last normal stitch, yarn over, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now again, you can see that I don't have a straight line here yet. I need to work in my turning chain for my 10th stitch. So again, I'm going to be going right underneath this back of the stitch and this right here so that I get 2 strands. Yarn over, then go right underneath this, right on through so that I've got both of those strands, and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now you know how to do the double crochet stitch. When you're ready to try something new, let's do the triple crochet or treble crochet next.